lot for joining us on the show. Congratulations on the first 100 days. I'm going to talk to you about achievements in just a bit. You've definitely got the sector back in news. It's making headlines. Let me first begin with something that must have made the government anxious at one level. How are you watching the situation unfold at the Supreme Court as far as the coal blocks are concerned? They've called it illegal. How much of a setback will it be if blocks where work has begun, at least initial work has begun, are deallocated?
Well, I have been consistent in my stand that what I'm looking for is finality.
Right.
I am not at all worried about what the Supreme Court will decide. I will welcome finality to this long-standing controversy and dispute. I would hope that come Tuesday, we will know exactly the direction in which this is headed, and we'll be able to start acting to get the mines back into operation, get new mines into operation, increase domestic coal availability. I'm certainly not concerned whether the decision goes one way or the other. The entire process has been declared to be illegal and arbitrary. Whatever the final decisions of the court are, we will respect them and we'll honor them and implement them.
Fair point indeed, and in fact a lot of your worst critics will turn around and say that that's a pragmatic approach to take. You cannot be at war with the Indian judiciary. Now let me just turn focus. You mentioned something very right, which is clarity. Everybody, investors like clarity. This will bring in clarity. But the counter argument to that is that it takes around 5 to 8 years for a mine to get on stream, for blocks to start production. Some of them perhaps have just begun to do that. Will that be a setback to this production in the country at least?
Not at all. The blocks which are already in production or which are soon going to get into production will ultimately, one way or the other, continue to produce. Whatever the Supreme Court may decide,
Right.
within the ambit of that, they will continue to produce. And if at all there is a temporary setback, there are ways and means to sort it out. We could import additional quantities. After all, these blocks put together only produced 37 million tons last year.
That's right.
Maybe this year 52 million tons is their target. In the worst case scenario, I'll import some more, or the Indian companies will import some more coal. Fortunately, international prices are quite subdued right now. So I'm not one of those who panics on anything. I think we need to sit down with a level head, find solutions, short term, medium term, long term. And I'm fairly confident that the big advantage of this will be finality, will be clarity in policy, and the confidence of international investors that under Mr. Narendra Modi's honest and decisive leadership, they can invest in India safely without fear of a future date being faced by a similar problem.
Because you've given your answer a political overtone, you've tempted me to ask you a political question. While in opposition, when the Coalgate scam had just broken out and we all woke up to those ugly headlines of how messy the coal business really was, the BJP had said that one should cancel all coal blocks. How are you today going to, through your legal officers, defend the position that at least where work has begun, do not cancel? Isn't there an irony?
But I am not choosing to defend anybody whatsoever. The government of India position is, we are not interfering in the decision of the Honorable Supreme Court.
Right.
Neither are we suggesting, recommending, pleading for any sort of concessions in any case. In the course of the last hearing, a mention was made about banks having invested a lot of money, production getting affected, and the disorientation of the existing blocks, to which the learned Attorney General mentioned that as a matter of information to the court, that there are 40 coal blocks which are already producing, 6 which have mining leases executed and can start producing within the current financial year.
Right.
It was more a matter of information to allow the court to take an informed decision. It is not a pleading.
Okay, so because the impression was as if you were defending the position, that's an important clarification.
It on the same day, on the 1st itself,
right.
in probably the same room, and I'm clarifying it again today.
Fair point indeed. You mentioned the word that we will sit with a level head and then take cognizance of the decision and decide on the way ahead. The next option, a lot of experts have said, is to auction coal blocks. That's a very transparent way to deal with natural resources. How ready is your ministry to do that?
Well, we are ready with a lot of concepts. We are also talking to experts both within the government and outside the government. I would urge through your channel to all your viewers also to give us good suggestions. What should be the right mechanism, which should be transparent, equitable, honest, and also ensure the welfare of the people of India. Ultimately, coal goes for certain regulated sectors
That's
like
right.
power and fertilizer.
And it has eventual impact on consumers.
On the consumer
Yes.
pricing.
Yes.
So I think we will like to take all these into consideration with cohesive plans and then start the process of giving out these.
So two questions there. How long will a cohesive plan take first?
I can't put a deadline because I don't know what the decision is.
Plan will be.
Once the decision comes on the 9th, we'll sit down with the officials and with the other experts in this field. And I think in a few days we'll be able to work out.
What is refreshing, however, to note here is that you are candid to observe that not every natural resource can be sourced at market rates because that has a obvious bearing to the consumer. That holds true for coal also?
In some respects, particularly when it relates to power and fertilizer, which are regulated sectors, impacting the common man. Having said that, it's equally important to have a transparent process and a process which allows everybody to participate and ensures a level playing field.
So at this stage, it is erroneous for some of us to presume that because they will be deallocated, you will next auction coal blocks. It's not such an obvious next step.
I'm open to all suggestions. My whole approach to life is to have an open mind. No ostrich-like fixation on anything.
Right.
And we'll take it along as it comes.
The reason why I'm asking you this question is that there were 3 blocks that were withdrawn from auction last month because they didn't find many takers. What would you attribute to this lack of demand or enthusiasm?
When I saw the 3 blocks and the kind of response we got, it pains me to find that those 3 blocks were actually probably amongst the worst blocks available to the government of India. And I don't understand why these were the blocks chosen for auction. They could never have been successful because most of them have huge habitations, they are in dense forests, the land is not available. I don't see any possibility that there could have been bidders for those blocks.
So a lot of thought didn't go into it before perhaps putting it for auction.
Probably, I feel sad about it.
Now that you have spent over 100 days, 107 days today or 106 today, 104. How limiting is the fact that environment clearances haven't come for a lot of this? You know, how much would you blame the environment clearances for the delay and the mess in your sector per se?
Hugely. I think on the one hand, we had this corruption scandal, which literally kept the whole sector in a state of limbo. On the other hand, starting 2010, when the go-no-go areas was introduced by the Environment Ministry, almost the entire development of the sector came to a standstill.
Right.
Nearly 50% of coal-bearing areas came in the no-go
zone. Yes.
So the whole sector stopped working. When the pressure became too high and the Prime Minister's office, then Prime Minister's office intervened, 2012 the go-no-go was relaxed, but inviolate areas was introduced. And can you believe, till the time we came in government, we didn't know what is an inviolate area. It remained undefined.
A lot of people say the previous government also did not know what the inviolate area was, so you're not to be blamed.
And then in 2012 or a little before that, they also introduced SEPI, a comprehensive environment protection program.
Right.
And the block 6 or 7 areas, when we came into government, 3 areas were still coming under SEPI guidelines, again an undefined guideline. So they were only studying them before releasing those areas. So the last 3 we have got released only recently.
Mr. Goyal, you've spent considerable amount of time overseas as well. Are we a third world country with first world aspirations as far as our environment is concerned?
No, I don't think we can afford to have first world
That's what I'm asking you. Can we afford to?
Are you talking of the environment sector
environment
or the
center.
Business?
The way our look is to environment, our US and Europe can today afford to be so cognizant of environment. Can we afford to be?
Absolutely not. I had this discussion even with several foreign delegations before I came into government and in the last 100 days also. And I've mentioned to them that India will have to be cognizant of the fact that we are far behind in the development cycle. And the foreign Western world will also have to recognize they've already polluted the environment enough.
And now
they are giving us those homilies, telling us what the damage to the world is and how we should cut
after doing the damage themselves.
That's right. So I believe they will have to recognize India's development imperatives. They will have to allow us the freedom to have a low-cost development program to help the people come out of poverty, create new jobs, industrialize, encourage manufacturing, strengthen our agricultural sector. Along with that, we are cognizant of our responsibilities towards the environment. Shri Narendra Modi himself is passionate about solar energy, wind energy, hydel power.
Right.
I think we will balance the two, respecting environmental concerns. We will still do a good job on development.
But you will not be taking up the environment as an adventure the previous government perhaps was. I want to ask you one more question on the scam and then move on to more policy space. The Colgate scam seems to suggest, and now because the Honorable Supreme Court has said that everything that was allocated was illegal, is there a presumption that there is a lot of corruption in corporate India? Is corporate India corrupt? Or does the system make them corrupt?
Ma'am, I for one am not one who passes a brush across sectors. I've said it on many occasions that people tend to comment about the public sector as being corrupt and inefficient. And they're always trying to plead for privatization. Whereas I personally believe it's all about leadership. The entire story is not about ownership of entities, it's about leadership. If you have visionary and honest leadership, decisive leadership, there's sincerity of purpose in your actions.
Right.
Whether it's public sector or private sector, you can do a good job. And irrespective of whether it's private or public, a bad leader, a dishonest leader can mess up.
But the mess in the sector is because of crony capitalism. Crony capitalism happens when the political and the business line gets completely blurred, and which is why my question came.
Absolutely. There are many instances where I think greed overtook national interest, whether in the corporate world, whether in the political world, whether a mix of all. I think different cases have different stories behind them.
Right.
But it's a sad thing for India that we have yet in so many years, save and except the few years where we saw the NDA one really come out with path-breaking reform and honesty in their governance. We didn't have governments which worked for the welfare of the people as sincerely and honestly as we would have liked. I think the country is finally seeing in Mr. Narendra Modi, particularly given his track record of 12 years in Gujarat, that type of a leader who can take the country out of this morass and despondence.
Two more questions on coal before I go to power, because that's the other portfolio you handle. The commercial coal mining, that's something that the industry is very eagerly awaiting for, looking at you for a cue. How soon will we see that being a reality?
Well, I think I need to sort out the bigger problems of enough availability of coal right now, rather than focusing on, as I said earlier, the ownership of coal mines. Commercial coal mining is a good idea, maybe in the long run, but we will have to recognize that the regulated sectors of power and fertilizer, which need coal first, need to be provided adequate coal. I am focusing on that right now.
What about Coal India? A lot of people thought that restructuring Coal India will be a big initiative, but in our first interaction you said that's not a crying need. We do not want to privatize it. We do not want to break it up in parts. My question to you is that the trade unions have very recently submitted a lot of demands. Don't look at another stake divestment. Do not look at privatization. Give them the cancelled coal blocks back.
I can tell you some more.
Exactly. Are those demands feasible at all?
Look, first of all, let me clarify that your concept of restructuring is not my concept. Unfortunately, there's a section of the media and even corporate world which believes restructuring of a public sector undertaking
is perhaps breaking it up.
Privatization or breaking it up. I disagree with that totally. For me, restructuring is improving efficiency. For me, restructuring is getting better honesty in their processes. For me, restructuring is maybe cost cutting. For me, restructuring could be better incentive-based programs to encourage the people to perform better. So I have a different set of concepts on restructuring. I think privatization or breaking it up
is not on your radar.
It could have some benefits, but I have to take the balance and move forward.
So are you putting your definition of restructuring to use as far as Coal India is concerned?
Oh yes, I'm focusing on theft of coal. I'm focusing on sorting out the problems of technology being outdated.
That's right.
I'm sorting out the quality problems in the coal sector, where you had boulders going, where you had unwashed coal being transported over long distances, where purchasers were not allowed to check the quality what was being supplied to them. I'm focusing on improving efficiency, setting right the systems within the current dispensation.
So a lot of people believe that it's coal production which is not as much of a problem, which now transportation seems to pose. Do you believe FDI and railways, because it's rail infrastructure, will solve some of that?
Well,
Or it's too long dong?
FDI will be a long-drawn, long-haul program, but we are open to FDI coming in infrastructure sectors. I think railway transport is certainly one of my biggest challenges. I'm personally focusing on that. After getting sworn in on the 27th and studying what are the challenges before me and which are the low-hanging fruits, I was at the railway minister's office on the 3rd or 4th day discussing with him 3 critical rail links which can add nearly 200 million tons to India's domestic production in the next 6 or 7 years. Similarly, I realized that if I have to achieve my target of 1 billion tons of coal from Coal India by 2019, which is nearly twice what it does now, I will need a lot more railway transport and rakes. Rather than depending on the railways, which is itself cash trapped, I have decided that Coal India will purchase 250 additional rakes and provide them to the railways to ensure that transportation doesn't become a bottleneck.
The financial restructuring package that the UPA had undertaken is now being reworked all over again. The question that some of us wonder is that SEBs are as it is overladen with debt. Can they afford some more time, some more delay?
In fact, ma'am, what the FRP had envisaged in April 2012, if you ask me, was absolutely nothing. In April 2012, all they announced in the FRP program was that the existing debt would be converted 50% into bonds and 50% into long-term loans.
That's right.
Opening up headroom for further short-term borrowing by these SEBs.
Right.
Now, if you ask me, that was no concession, no improvement of the existing system. That is what added the debt.
That's right.
And then they took 18 months to implement it. Now, when you implement a program of April 12 in October 13, it's already lost. It's already lost its importance. It's like giving a heart patient a booster dose or a medicine a few months after he got a heart attack.
That's right.
I am looking at the whole thing state by state and analyzing the situation and the remedies on a case-by-case basis. There can't be a one-size-fits-all.
So there can't be like one solution for all states.
Obviously, you understand that in business, in any organization, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
Also, it depends on the sincerity of the state in improving their systems and policies. I mean, you can't have a Jammu and Kashmir where the transmission, distribution losses and theft is upward of 60 or 70%.
That's right.
Having the same formula which I can have for Andhra Pradesh, where the T&D losses is only 15%.
True.
Similarly, Jharkhand and Bihar have their own challenges. Uttar Pradesh will have its own problems. And they had created a model law which none of the states seems to have passed. So I'm believing more in terms of consensus building, a dialogue, and why I think I'll be successful is because the states also see in us more integrity and honesty, where we sit down across the table, discuss issues and sort them out real time. I don't tell them I'll go back and I'll decide. I decide on the spot.
Why I'm asking you this is, Mr. Goyal, because we put out headlines of SEB restructuring 2 years back. We continue to do that. By when will those headlines go out of space? Because work has happened.
Your definition of restructuring. Is it only additional loans?
No, not
or
restructuring.
financial?
By that I mean, when is that mess going to be sorted out? In whatever way, however else you
as
contour
fast
it.
as each state comes forward with their own commitments, with their own plans, and sits down with my officials to find a composite solution. The union budget this year has announced some wonderful schemes.
Right.
We have the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana to have segregation of distribution feeders in the rest of the states. 8 states have it, the rest of India urgently needs it. We have had the Integrated Power Development Fund introduced, which will finally bring in the urban India a strong sub-transmission and distribution system along with smart metering.
Right.
We're going to invest upward of 75,000 crores in both these schemes. And I think if the states come forward with corresponding enthusiasm and support, we'll be very successful.
There's one thing that a lot of your worst enemies will give you credit for, and which is perhaps you've been very pragmatic as far as funding for your sector is concerned. And I think some of the biggest NPAs in the banking space is because of power sector, connected to coal wars, all of that. The question is that people are shying away from lending anymore. You've spoken about innovative funding for the space. How much innovation can there be if banks and financial institutions do not want to lend to the power sector?
Well, I had a very, very detailed and elaborate meeting with most of the senior bankers.
That's right, yes.
I understood what their problems were in great detail. Of course, one very clear indicator of the renewed enthusiasm in this sector is the number of deals that are happening, the number of companies that are changing hands, and the fact that there is competition amongst bidders to try and take over those companies. I think there is an enthusiasm in the sector both internationally and in India. People want to invest once again. They see that there is a government which will sort out this mess. And personally, I feel there's a lot of scope for innovative financing. I mean, I've thrown some ideas about a power fund which will provide last mile funding, take out some of the problems of existing banks, and possibly bring in better management, even if that involves companies like NTPC, which is one of the world's finest run power companies,
Right.
even though it's in the public sector.
True.
And nobody has ever suggested restructuring in your definition of NTPC.
My definition is not as micro as you think it is, but yes, let's carry on.
My point is there is enthusiasm in the system. I have been approached by private equity investors from all over the world who want to invest. The Japanese and the Australians have indicated their interest to come into the energy sector in India. I'm sure the Americans are also watching. And I personally feel that in the days to come, a lot of these problems will be behind us. And you'll see people fighting to invest in this sector.
And perhaps a good thing will be if the clarity for coal comes, banks will perhaps loosen their purse strings once again. A controversial topic here, and that has to do with tariffs. There is very little incentive that even SEBs have because there is such political influence of tariffs. You have a regulator who's toothless. Is the time right and ripe? And will we see politics being out of pricing over the next 5 years in your government? Because you're pragmatic, you understand business limitations as well.
But I also understand that the common man and the poor farmer have their own limitations of being able to afford the inefficiencies of the system.
Right.
I personally believe a lot of the pricing is because of inefficiencies in the system. If we did not have to import coal and had not had this scam and these environmental problems and increased domestic production, which was required, the power prices need not have been so high. If we didn't have power theft and inefficient state governments, and the emulated examples like Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh, possibly their states wouldn't have had to charge their farmers and their poor men such high tariffs. So in my opinion, it's not just about increasing tariffs. It's about honesty, it's about operational efficiency, and it's about the state government's intention to improvise.
So just to take a question and a cue from what you just said, people should not be burdened. A decision is expected very soon on the natural gas prices. Your predecessor had said that anything above $5 per unit is not going to be viable for the power sector, given its woes. You're trying to sort out some of that mess. But
will you allow me some innovation in that sector?
But that's what I'm asking you. Anything above 5, anything above 6, will that make your business unviable?
I tell you, ma'am, I'm open to whatever price the government sets, whatever price is required for these companies to produce more and have more domestic gas. I'm happy to accept that. And I will structure and restructure my own business or my sectors appropriately. I believe gas plants have a very important role in the system. They act like a spinning reserve, particularly to even out the disparities in frequency and the load factor in the system, in the grid. So I see them acting as peaking power plants, spinning reserves. And I think we'll certainly like to use every avenue.
They can act as a great
power.
catalyst, but they can't double prices, can they?
We'll see what happens, and then maybe all the stakeholders will participate in keeping tariffs reasonable.
I have two questions to ask you, more on a personal level. The first is when you took office, 24/7 power across India is what your government and you had spoken about. Over 100 days into the job, does this look like a pipe dream? India is no Gujarat after all.
In fact, my resolve is only strengthened. I'm convinced it will happen. At that time, it was a promise made without papers and files. Today, I'm convinced I'll
People will call you a brave man.
Well, with Mr. Narendra Modi as Prime Minister backing me up, I'm confident this government will make it happen.
On that note, thanks very much for talking to us, Mr. Goyal. Such a pleasure.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.